Well, we're going to talk about finger relationships and spacing. There's really three big priorities for playing the fiddle. The top one is the bow, which plays in time. That allows you to play in time, allows you to play well, make a nice sound. And there are other exercises to help you towards that goal. The second priority is to play all the right fingers at the right time, which will give you the profile of the tune. So if you play the right note fingers at the right time uh, with your bow, uh, you are going to know the tune, you're going to hear the tune, people will recognize it. The third priority to polish the tune is to put your fingers in the right places so that they are the right relationships with each other, and then you're going to keep playing in tune. If you have a minor tune, it will sound minor, or major, it will sound major, and it will be a pleasure to listen to. So that's what we're going to do right now, talk about how to get your fingers in the right relationships with each other. And we're going to use this finger finder to talk about it. If you don't have one, you'll still learn something about the finger relationships. If you have one, you can take it out and work along with me. If you don't have one, you'll see maybe not all the details, but enough to understand how it works. So the finger finder is it's unique, and I can say that because it's patented, which means there was nothing else like it. And what it is a slide rule that allows you to look up a finger position for any key that you want. You can either look it up by the name of the key if you know it, or by the key signature if you have written music that shows a key signature. There's two windows. There's the big window that shows the finger spacing, and there's a small window which allows you to look up the key or key signature. Now, once you look up the key signature, say we're looking in the key of D in this instance, it also shows down here B minor. The key thing is that it shows each finger as a circle. So it's arranged vertically, the way you might hold a violin this way, where the top heavy line is the nut here, which is what the strings cross to go into the peg box. So right next to the nut is the first circle. Right next to that circle is the second place for a finger, and so on. The important thing on this finger finder is that all of the circles are adjacent. They're touching each other, because that's what actually happens when you play. When you have two fingers that are supposed to be touching, this shows that the circles actually are touching. Now, horizontally are lines which mark out the territory of each finger. And it's very nice to know that there's a finite number of positions for each finger. Even though there's no frets, we have specific places for the fingers and limited number of places, namely 2. There's the low position and the high position for each finger. Then there's a little line showing you that the next 2 positions belong to the next finger. Now sometimes there's either a empty white circle or a number in a circle. If there's an empty white circle, it means we don't use that position for that key in that string. If there's a number, it tells you which finger to use. So there's a first finger, second, third, and fourth. If you're looking at music where there's an accidental mark, like a sharp or a flat or a natural, that means that in that key that you looked up, that particular note is moved over to the white circle. You'll notice when you look at the patterns here that each string generally has 2 fingers that are touching on each string. And that limits the amount of information you actually need to know. If you look over at this, for example, key of D, you'll see that the middle 2 strings, which are very commonly used, use this positioning where the second and third fingers are touching. And that's what you keep in mind. Then when you go to the E string, the second finger moves down to be touching the first finger. And that's probably the most important thing about the key of D, is that when you're playing fiddle tunes and you're playing on the top 3 strings, remember that the E string is where the second finger changes from near the third, touching the third, to touching the first. And as you look at it, at the relationships, you can see that. You can also see how the relationships go from one string to another. For example, if I have my first finger on the A string, second finger on the E string, and I'm in this key of D, then those fingers are going to be touching, even though they're on different strings. And that's how you can play in tune, by thinking of the relationships between the fingers and not just putting your finger in the correct place. This finger finder can help you with note patterns that are important, which we'll cover in other videos in this technique video group. The most basic one is a scale, where you play every single note in order. You start with the key note. Now, if I look in the key of D, I'll see that the open D here is a blue circle, a dark blue, and that indicates it's a D. So all the dark blue notes on the finger finder are the key notes. So if I move to key of G, then the dark blue ones are the Gs. If I move back to D, the dark blue ones are the Ds. And so I can start with that, and I can learn the relationships of the fingers throughout the scale. And you can decide what is the most important information. For example, on the key of G, the first two strings have this position where the second and third finger are touching. That's such a common position, you can almost consider it the default and hardly think about it. But the top two strings are where the second finger moves back to the first, to touching the first. So you could play in the key of G very successfully if you think of that one bit of information, which is that when you move from the D string to the A string, you have to keep your second finger back to the first on the top two strings, and then you'll be doing fine with that key. So the other thing you can do besides doing scales up and down and just rehearsing where all the fingers belong, in order to play tunes in that key, so that you know your fingers are set and they know what to do. The other thing is arpeggios. A lot of tunes are made up of scales and arpeggios. Now, an arpeggio is where you play the chord notes one at a time. Since the violin isn't a very good chordal instrument like a guitar or a piano is, we play the chord notes in many tunes, and the basic chord is the first, the third, and the fifth notes of the scale. And it's marked on the finger finder here with the blue, as I mentioned, would be the key note. The yellow notes are the third and the fifth notes of the scale. So if you were to practice just looking at this, the blue, yellow, and yellow notes, you would be practicing an arpeggio. And over time, when you get to know that, going up and down an arpeggio, you'll hear it and recognize it often as you try to learn tunes, and you'll be much quicker at grouping whole measures sometimes of tunes, knowing that that's just an arpeggio notes, and you'll recognize it and know how to play them. There's little notes on the back of the sliding card that tell you tips on how to use it. One of them talks about backup chords if you want to accompany. There are ways to simply use the blue and yellow colored notes to choose backup chords. If you are a violin player and you're looking to study, for example, second and third position as you play, you can get one of these for violin, and you can use another card that's in the back here, which allows you to see the first and second position grayed out. And if you put your first finger where your third would normally be, then you follow this pattern to see how to play in any given key in third position. Or if you turn it over, then you get the second position. So that's for more advanced players interested in studying that. You can also, as a fiddler, study start with the first finger in any position, and if you avoid using the open string, you can get a pattern that will work, that you can use up the fingerboard in different keys. So there are many things you can try with this. The basic ones are the relationships between fingers, where the half step is on each string. There's usually just one. And the fact that your fingers have different territories that they cover, a finger width apart. 2 per finger. And what the pattern is all you need to know to play in any key. So you get a weird tune that's maybe in 3 flats, and you can look it up and simply play it. They're not that hard to do. And then you can practice scales to get the fingers going up and down, and you can practice arpeggios to get the chordal notes. Maybe 75–80% of all the fiddle tunes use scales and chords in some combination. So when you become familiar with them, it's much easier to pick up tunes by ear and to remember how they go. So give it a try. You can always get a finger finder here on this site or at edperlman.net/fingerfinder. And you can also get it at Shar Music in their teaching aids section. So I hope you make use of it. There's another kind that's called a finger finder for fiddle and mandolin. It's a little bit cheaper, and the only difference mainly is that it doesn't have the card for second and third position. Also, it suggests ways where the mandolin players could use it by thinking of each circle as a fret. So enjoy.